Hello, everyone. Welcome to Star Psych. And today I want to talk about a concept or a thing that I've noticed in intuitive types in MBTI that isn't strictly labeled or said by Jung or anything like that, but it's something that I've kind of noticed working with people, especially now that I've been doing coaching and typing for 2 years. And this is the concept that I've come to coin as the silver medal syndrome. And I'm going to talk about what that is here in a few moments, but it is really what it kind of sounds like, the struggle of the intuitive type to kind of end up in that silver or second place slot. But I want to talk about why they tend to struggle with this and what's the mindset that leads to intuitives ending up with this syndrome. Let's get into it. So what is the silver medal syndrome and why do intuitives tend to end up with this syndrome? Well, it's really when someone has the ability to do well in a lot of different things, typically very quickly and with very little effort, but at the same time, they find themselves struggling to succeed at a level that would allow them to achieve first or some sort of very high ranking in the thing that they are working within. So, for example, this is someone who's able to pick up maybe new tasks, skills, work habits, video games, things of this nature. They're able to achieve high competency in these things very quickly, maybe even art as well, but they struggle to become extremely proficient or top tier in these activities. And why do intuitives tend to specifically end up with silver medal syndrome as opposed to the sensing types? Well, intuitive types overall tend to learn more quickly as opposed to the sensing types. And why is that? Well, the intuitive types tend to also be people who spend a lot of time skimming or going over the general concepts of whatever it is that they are interacting with. They don't want to spend a lot of time going into the details and really fully understanding whatever it is that they might be interacting with. Now, this is going to differ if you, for example, are an introverted thinking dominant type with secondary supporting intuition, because that type might, say, for example, spend more time learning something before they get into that kind of interacting process. But a lot of the intuitive types in general are going to find that they're going to get bogged down when they're given too many details to interact with at one specific point, and they kind of just want to take the general concept and run with it. The skill set of the intuitive is that their skills in general tend to be a little bit more universally applicable compared to the types who maybe are sensing types. And what does that mean? Well, to give a personal example, as someone who has competed, regionally in fighting games, like Soul Calibur, Blaze Blue, these sorts of games are my personal favorites. I find that when I start learning a new fighting game or a new video game, I'm able to, within about an hour or two, get up to a very high level of competency compared to peers who are just getting the game. And because of that, especially if a game has just come out in the first week or two, I find myself racing to the top of the leaderboards faster than any of the other players who might be starting with me. But at the same time, once that 3 to 4 week period of initial learning has started to pass, and the people who really, really are putting in time and effort to learn the extreme fundamentals of the game start to gain more experience, then I find that I personally start to really struggle fighting against the more competent players. And it's because for me, as an intuitive type, an intuitive dominant, I'm able to grasp the core concepts of a new thing that I'm interacting with and put them into use extremely quickly. I would say much faster than a lot of the other types. But I also tend to put in a lot less effort than some of the other types, specifically some of the types who tend to be higher on sensing, or maybe even specifically more than that, the introverted sensing highest types, I think, are going to be the ones who are going to spend the most time kind of honing their ability or really taking the time to learn the thing that they are going to be interacting with. And again, INTPs are kind of this weird exception in the middle where they can spend a lot of time on something despite being an intuitive type. But I've noticed that as a consistent trend for almost any kind of video game that I interact with, is that during those first few weeks, I can race and be even top 10 in the leaderboards. But once that initial learning phase starts to pass and the people who are going to spend more time start interacting with the game, I start to burn out. I start to be like, well, I don't want to put in like 15 hours a day just to stay on par with the most competitive players, because to me it's not worth it, because this isn't something that I really, really, really care about. It's just something I kind of care about, that I enjoy a lot, and that I want to do in my spare time. And for me, that initial learning process is what allowed me to race to the head of these leaderboards, despite the fact that I wasn't putting in an insane amount of effort. This example can become even more clear when you can understand what separates a good player from a fantastic player when it comes to competitive fighting games. And I know I'm using this example a lot, but I think it's a really good representation of what really might be holding someone like me back or someone else who might be experiencing a similar effect back, and how they can begin to kind of overcome these struggles. In fighting games, what separates a good player from a great or fantastic player is understanding what's called frame data. And frame data is understanding how each and every single attack that your character can use, how long it is going to take in terms of the frames per second on the screen, how long it's going to take to hit the enemy, how long it's going to take to recover from that attack, if the enemy can hit you after you did it because your cooldown from using the attack is too long, essentially, and your character has to get back into his stance. And there's literally thousands and thousands of numbers for each and every character throughout the game that you're going to have to learn if you want to understand at an extremely competent level. You have to break down the game to extremely minute details and be able to react to those details accordingly if you want to be someone who plays at the highest tier level of fighting games. And I found that I never, ever, despite competing regionally in fighting games, could get interested in understanding frame data. It bores me to death to want to read through all of these small numbers and understand what is this character doing? How long does it take to recover? How long does it take him to do this? Instead, when I'm playing, I have this it's intuitive sense of those factors. Instead of literally reading the numbers and going, okay, my attack takes 10 frames and it's going to take me 15 to recover. So if he does one that's 13 frames during my 15 frame recovery, he's going to hit me. I'll say, oh, this one, in my mind, I'll just go, oh, this one looks like it takes a while to recover. So I'm not going to use it very often unless I'm sure that it's going to connect and it's not going to leave me wide open after. And I don't feel like I have to study all of those numbers, but the people who do study those numbers, the people who do take that time, tend to be the ones who really succeed in these types of activities. And this isn't just something that applies to fighting games, even though this is the example I'm using. You can apply this to almost any sort of skill set or ability that's going to involve a competitive nature. If you look at people who do competitive sports, for example, understanding the extreme intricacies of the rules and how the game is played, for example, is going to be something that's going to be very, very beneficial. You could even say with other even video games like League of Legends is extremely competitive. People who understand the ins and outs of every single mechanic of every single character on a detail-to-detail basis are going to do better than the ones who don't. And the struggle for intuitive types is that they usually don't want to get stuck in these details and they want to see things from that kind of bird's eye perspective. Now, this doesn't mean that intuitives can't go beyond their silver medal syndrome, It just means that they're going to have to struggle once they get past that initial stage of excitement when it comes to learning something that they are not familiar with. So can this actually be a positive thing for the intuitive type, having this kind of silver medal syndrome and having a wide range of abilities and the ability to kind of learn quickly? Well, in some ways, yes, because the intuitive tends to take up the archetype of the jack of all trades, master of none. Now, this is going to depend on a person-by-person basis, of course, but I do find that the intuitives tend to have a more general, broad skill set that they are going to have within one specific domain, instead of a very, very specific, strong skill, singular skill within that domain. So again, their skills are going to be slightly more transferable, and I find that the intuitive types tend to have less what I would call weaknesses and a wide array of skills that are at a baseline level of competency and even proficient at times. Because when I say silver medal syndrome, it's important to remember that I usually mean like second or third place a lot of the times. The intuitive type can become extremely proficient if they put in even just a little bit of effort. But the struggle is that they don't want to put in a lot of effort or nearly as much effort as some of those sensing types that can really, really take, 10 to 15 hours a day doing one specific thing over and over and over again until they feel like they have some extreme level of honed mastery associated with that skill. And you are going to find differences between introverted intuitive types and extroverted intuitive types. And specifically, I mean with the functions, not like INFPs versus ENFPs. I mean with the cognitive functions of introverted intuition and extroverted intuition. And that the extroverted intuitive type is going to struggle with the silver medal syndrome because they're going to be the ones who like to jump around between things, and they don't want to stay in one place for too long. When they do stay in one place, they can become quite competent within that one skill, but they are going to be the ones who generally just kind of want to go hop around, do what's interesting, and then maybe come back to something again in the future. But even if they come back to it, it's almost more for an experimentation point of view as opposed to maybe a mastery point of view. For the NI dominant types, or even the NI auxiliary types, I find that there's more of this wanting to become proficient at one skill, but also there's this laziness associated with learning that skill, and that they're just going to take the general concepts and try to run with them as quickly as possible, especially NTJs. I find that NTJs do not want to spend a lot of time really digging down into the details. What you are going to see with NTJs is they're going to look towards authorities when it comes to what is good, especially NTJs. They're going to say, okay, the pros are using this, that's what I should use. The best player on the earth is using this, that's what I should do. And the INTJ is going to do that occasionally, not as much as the ENTJ, but they are going to find themselves looking to the more competent players to kind of give them advice as to what they should be doing, instead of maybe trying to start from ground zero and building up their own level of understanding when it comes to the skill that they want to build competency within. So what do intuitive types do to kind of get over silver medal syndrome? What is it that inspires the intuitive type? What is it that's going to make them put a lot of energy and effort into something, as opposed to maybe with the sensing types who are okay with doing the more detail-oriented tasks, even if they take a lot of repetition? Well, the intuitive types are usually going to spend more time kind of mulling over ideas, and that's why you tend to find them in the very abstract fields and be the best in these abstract fields. Most astrophysicists in the world are probably NTPs or NTJs. Most counselors and psychologists who are very theoretical in nature are going to be NFPs or NFJs. And this is because these are going to be the types who spend a lot of time mentally, internally, intuitively mastering these concepts, as opposed to mastering the details related to these concepts. Because something, for example, like psychology isn't going to be super detail-oriented. It's more about thinking about ideas. It's more about thinking about concepts. And therefore, you're going to find that the sensing types, when it's time for them to go into learning about those concepts, they're going to have the silver medal syndrome, where maybe they're like, okay, well, I can learn about these things, but I'm not terribly interested in spending 10 to 15 hours a day doing that. And it's because for them, that requires more mental effort. Just like how for the intuitive type, it requires mental effort to want to jump into the details. So it's not that either of the types, either of the sides of this coin can't do the other side. It's that it's going to take active effort. And if you are an intuitive type, you're not going to need much effort to process things from the point of view of it being an ideal or concept. Just as if you're a sensing type, you're not going to have to spend much effort processing things that require you to dive into those details, because you're going to be naturally drawn towards doing it that way in the first place. It's when you have to jump into the other side of things that it becomes a problem, when you're going to have to expend effort. And that is what typically leads, I think, the intuitive type to have more of a silver medal syndrome than the sensing type, because a lot more tasks in the world are going to require a level of diving into the details than they might require when it comes to learning something from the intuitive or abstract point of view. Or maybe a lot of things just kind of have a very baseline level of intuitive understanding, so there's not really much depth that needs to be found with the intuitive type. They can just go, okay, I understand this, so why do I need to go through all the details? But with the sensing type, they're going to want to go through those details, even if they don't feel like, even if there isn't a ton of them, even if it isn't something that they feel like they have to do, they're going to want to do it because it's going to help them build that understanding and make them feel like they've kind of gone through it all, fully accomplished the thing, checked off everything on the list, essentially. All right, everybody, those are the basics of the silver medal syndrome, something that I've noticed over the past few years. I think I've even mentioned it maybe in a live stream or something before, but I've never made a video about it. I just wanted to talk about it. Let me know in the comment section down below. What do you think of the silver medal syndrome? As an intuitive type, is it something that you relate to? As a sensing type, do you notice this in maybe friends or even yourself? Is this something that you think applies to you as well? Let me know down in the comment section below. I would like to remind everybody that I do have personality typing sessions available, as well as coaching at my website, asuraspsych.com, if you're interested in working with me to find out what your personality type is and what that means for you. This has been Asura from Asura Psych. Have a good one.